Today we finish off with our study of the unanswered questions, SD 40A.10, the part 3 of 3. Today we're on page 81. We will finish off our study on the unanswered questions. We will look at the significance of the Buddha's response to the unanswered questions, and look at how it led to some interesting cultural developments in India, for example, and also some philosophical significance like the unthinkables and a few other general things of some interest related to our study. Now, besides the word avyakata, there's another word called achinteya. They are very close. Avyakata means undeclared, unanswered, undetermined, or cannot be answered. Doesn't make sense if we try to talk about it. It's anybody's guess, as some people say. It's got no answer at all. It's not very helpful, in fact. It's a wrong question, a question wrongly put, a misleading question, a trick question, and so on. So in other words, you get caught in the loop of talking and arguing. It doesn't go anywhere. Achinteya is a broader term. Achinteya means that which cannot be thought about, beyond the realm of thought, beyond logic, beyond reasoning, if you like. So here, when we talk about the unthinkables, it's a much broader term. It includes some of those questions that are unmeaningful, unhelpful. There are some things in our lives which cannot be thought about. Thinking, or the mind, if you like, what the mind as thinking cannot access. What does the mind as thinking mean in the first place? Well, all these are quite clear in Buddhism. When the mind relies on the five senses, in other words, the mind does not rely on itself. It follows whatever the five senses present to it and take it to be reality. Right? That is said to be thinking. So the mind, in a sense, think through 5 ways, or even 6 ways if we include the mind itself. The mind sees something and it thinks, it comments, hears something, smell, taste, touch, and sometimes thoughts will come back from the past. So these are regarded as external sense objects. So whenever the mind is entertaining external sense objects, we call it thinking. In other words, it's not a direct experience of reality. It is a kind of a discursive mind, a mind talking to itself and dealing with something in between, not looking at the real thing. It's like you're looking through different colored lenses when you look at the world outside. Okay? You start talking about all those filtered picture, colored pictures that you see. So this is where, in other words, we don't really see the real thing. You got to remove all those lenses, remove all those sense objects if you want really to have a direct experience of things. Now that's the theory for the moment. As we go along, you find it becomes clearer. What are the achinteyas? There are 4 of them, 4 unthinkables. This is found in the Anguttara, the Book of Force. Number 1 is called Buddha Visaya. We can never think of the Buddha's range, the mind of the Buddha. It's impossible. It's impossible to even fathom the awakened mind because we have not become awakened ourselves. I mean, we don't have to talk about the Buddha's mind. We just need to talk about the mind of a great thinker, a teacher. You can never really know his mind because his wisdom is really deep, very wide, you see. Then there is what's called jhana visaya, the range of dhyana, deep meditation. Again, there's no way we can encompass this, because the tool of our measuring here is thinking, and jhana is beyond thinking. When thinking stops, you get into this deep focus. So jhana is beyond thought. So here when we say unthinkable, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, not at all. It means you cannot fathom it with thought. Yeah, you can even say that in literature, for example, in the humanities, you have to use your feeling. Directly experience reality, something like that. But that's more on a mundane level. Okay? Even there also we have this idea of going beyond our thought. If you are taught to play music, for example, your music teacher will tell you, don't think about it, play the music, something like that. So that's a kind of a worldly idea. Yeah? Then there is karma vipaka, the results of karma. You can't really fathom this, you can't think about this. There are so many possibilities. On a simple level, we can talk about the theory of probability. It's one of the most tricky aspects of mathematics. There are so many possibilities. You may try to calculate it, but that's only in mathematics. In reality, you can't. We can guess or hope certain things will happen, but when the time comes, things are different. And then number 4, we come to close to the avyakatas, the undetermined questions or undeclared questions. Loka cinta, thinking about the world. Here meaning there are many ways of looking at the universe, and it's impossible to really know the state of the universe using our thoughts, so to speak. So this is another interesting area, an interesting word, loka cinta, thinking about the world. Whether it's a beginning, no beginning, is it infinite or not, and so on. So these are the 4 unthinkables. So this is where, how do some of these gurus get their way around? They try to play with words. They try to say that they know all these things, but they can't tell you. Secret teaching, for example, right? But that doesn't help. So the Buddha said, these are 4 things you can think about. And then there are those questions which are undetermined, undeclared, and just leave them alone. They don't really matter. So what matters then? What matters are things that are meaningful to us, things that give us purpose in our life. When we say something is meaningful, what does it mean? So you can see here we have a bit of a problem. Meaning of meaning. It's one of the aspects of modern philosophy also. Well, Buddhism gives a very simple answer. It's sense-based. Whatever we experience, whatever we see, smell, taste, or touch, they are related to the 5 senses. Then we say it's meaningful. For example, I see something, and then what do I see? I see colors, shapes, brightness, right? And they are so. So I say, oh yes, I can see this is the color red, color blue. So it makes sense to me. It is, to that simple level, it's meaningful to me. Then of course I will add on more meanings to it. For example, if I see red, I tell myself, okay, what does it mean? Depends on my culture. Depends on what I've been conditioned in terms of understanding colors, right? So in other words, we superimpose our past on this present. So that is another aspect of meaning in terms of time. So here, meaning has to do with our present experience and in terms to do with the past also, and also how we look, how we relate this into the future, right? So it's a time-based thing. Well, if it is time-based, then of course it's impermanent. We must change. Indeed, to exist, we must exist in time. We can say something amazing like God is timeless, but that's just a matter of saying it's not real. Something is timeless, in reality it doesn't exist. Of course, when we say the timeless mountains, that's poetic, it's different. It means the mountains seem to be permanent. So we have to be very careful the way we talk with words and language. We don't always mean what we say. We hyperbolize things. We use words to make things bigger than what they appear to be. So we have to, in other words, see beyond the words what things really are. So that's another sense of meaning. Seeing beyond the words, through the words. What is this person trying to say? Notice how sometimes, or very often in fact, people like to say a lot of things. They say so many things, but none of those things make sense. We don't know what it is because we have not got the answer yet. The question we asked has not been answered. Lots of words. No? So it doesn't make sense in other words. So we have to go on asking until we get the answer. So meaning has to do with the direct experience of our senses. Now once we understand the nature of such experiences, the next thing we ask ourselves, what do I do with these things? What do I do with this knowledge? Right? We don't just say, okay, very nice, you know. Take for example, you see this beautiful sunset or wonderful moonlit, or rather moonless, cloudless night sky with millions of stars. It's so beautiful. You look at it and you feel very joyful. At that time, that's your meaning of life. You feel so good, so happy. Then after that, you tell yourself, yes, I must tell people about this. I want other people to be happy too. Right? So you have a purpose. Whenever you see something beautiful, something liberating, we never stop there really. We can if we want to. But when we look around, we see other people not experiencing these things. We are troubled by it in a sense. Not trouble in a bad way, trouble in a sense, a kind of sadness that people are suffering. You know, you're telling yourself, why can't they see this thing? It's so beautiful. Let me try and tell them about it. So you are moved by compassion. Okay? Wisdom is the ability to see things as they really are. Then you see people not knowing those things, you want them to know. So that's compassion. You are pushed to try to tell people, hey, come on, look at this, it's a beautiful thing. Today it's harder to do this because people know too much. They have too many views. They're asking the wrong questions. They even think they know all the answers, especially if they have studied Pali or Abhidharma or even the suttas, or some degree, some PhD in some courses. And we feel a great sense of achievement. And we think now we know everything. But the sad thing is, there's one thing we have yet to know. That's our own minds. There's no PhD in knowing the mind. You have to know it yourself directly. And it is full of surprises. So this purpose that we have now, therefore, is to try very hard to tell people, look within yourself. You can see the answer there. Question yourself. Then you get the right answers. So in other words, what is troubling us today, what is hindering us from awakening, from knowing ourselves, freeing ourselves, so that we are liberated like the Buddha, are our own views, how we see things. And views are really tricky. Remember, the word view also means how we see things. If you do see things with the eye, with the mind, there's only one way of seeing things. There are many other versions of it, so to speak. Yeah? So this is where, in a sense, you might say we have to keep on extending our vision. Sometimes the word vision is used, darshana, in a good sense. In other words, you see round the whole mountain, above and even below, underground. You have a very good idea. Wow, this mountain in a three-dimensional way. But even that is also a view. But it's much better than just one side of the mountain. But after you have climbed the mountain, you feel very good. You feel so happy. And then you just enjoy yourself at the top of the mountain or near the mountain. You feel very good and happy. Your journey is complete. No more views. Where does view comes from? View comes from language. We use language to communicate, to discuss things, which is helpful to some extent, but sooner or later we have to go beyond language. In the three trainings, you see the significance or the function of language quite clear. For example, in terms of practicing the precepts, moral virtue, training in moral virtue, language is very important. We talk about understanding the precepts, how to practice the precepts well, and then you have the one of the precepts about telling the truth, right? So precepts have a lot to do with how we act through body, speech, and of course intention is there too. In other words, it has to do with communication, language and communication. Moral virtue has to do with communication also. Then in mental cultivation, yes, you have a bit of language at first when you learn to meditate, but as the real meditation begins, when you start renouncing the body, renouncing speech, and then renouncing even feelings, the mind is really at peace, so you give up language altogether. Then when you come out with this wonderful deep stillness, your mind is so clear, you can see reality as it is, and that is wisdom. So, in this sense, Buddhism is empirical, Buddhism is hands-on, you go directly into the experience, and you don't need help from anyone in this sense. You don't need help from anyone in the sense you have to do it yourself. Of course, it's really good to get help from others to teach us the suttas, to teach us Pali, teach us the Dharma, help us to answer difficult questions. Definitely, it is useful. And that you need that at the start. But in real practice, once you start to do the practice seriously on your own, you have to do it yourself, sooner or later. So, in other words, we start off by listening to others, by second-hand knowledge, third-hand knowledge, fourth-hand knowledge. But then, sooner or later, we have to take the food ourselves. No one else can take the food for us, in other words. And then we feel full, satisfied, we get energy, we're healthy. Language is a means of communication. We use language, we use words, we use ideas. All these create truths. So, in other words, we tend to create truths, and we communicate with these truths. Truth here, of course, refers to something which I have seen as connected with what I experience, not something different. And you accept that too, so it's like a conventional agreement, and we're able to communicate in a functional way. Society is functional, right? So that's useful. But they're still created truth. They're still manufactured, fabricated realities, if you like. There's a difference between truth and reality, by the way. Truth is, we can create truth, but reality, you cannot really create it. We can try, but it's basically what's called virtual reality. So we discover reality. The Buddha discovered the realities of the Four Noble Truths. Now, because what the Buddha discovered is in accordance with what is real out there, we call that a truth. So you can see it's a bit tricky here, but it's a matter of just how we use words. Truth is, in a sense, the way we look at things. Reality is what is really out there. Okay? So if what we see is what we get, that is the truth, real truth. Okay? And what we see out there is really what it is, then it is true reality. This is one way we can safely talk using words to explain experience in terms of truth and reality. And where do our experiences come from? Of course, it comes from our senses. That's the everything, that's the all, according to the Sabha Sutta. So that's all we have, our senses, to experience things. So we have to make sure our senses are clear, not confused. That is why the fifth precept is very important. We do not want to cloud up our senses, our faculties. Because these are like very sensitive monitors. You want them to be able to experience the world clearly, directly. And that way, we will not be fooled by our own self, so to speak. So it is the mind that is the observer of all these sensors, 6 sensors, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, experiencing everything inside and outside of us. So this mind, in other words, is also a faculty, and it is this mind that needs to be clear. Now we have talked a lot about the mind and the senses, so I won't go too much into that. What we can say is, with a mind that is well trained, well disciplined, we can discover the world. This is not to conquer the world. We conquer ourselves, but we discover the world. It's the Buddhist way of talking. Buddhist way of talking. What does this mean? We discover the world. That means we understand how our senses work. That's our world. How the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind work. Then we conquer ourselves. We tame ourselves. We free the self. We let go of the ego. We puncture the balloon called the big I. How do we do this? By simply accepting what we see as seeing, what we hear as sounds, and so on. This is called to see the world objectively. They are, after all, objects. Subjectively means to manufacture your own ideas. The mind often does this. But in meditation, we have to let go of the subjective aspects and see the things objectively before we can let go of even the objective experiences themselves, so that we clear our minds completely and there is peace. So by understanding how our senses work, we try to see what we get. You must be able to see something, experience something, be something before you can be nothing, before you can let go of them. So once you let go of them, then you discover a deeper world, the world of peace, joy. The truly renounce the world. That's the world that has no views, no ideas. And then when you come out of this kind of great stillness, then you're able to see the world more clearly. And if you, in other words, the mind has no preconceived ideas, you don't try to fit the world into your ideas, but you try to see the world as it is. And one way you look at it is, of course, you see the world as conditionality. The world as changing all the time. And this is, of course, famously formulated in the formula of dependent arising, right? So this is dependent arising, so on page 85 here. Here again, we have dealt with this separately in great detail, so I won't go into this anymore. All that we can say is, whatever happens in our daily lives are the activities of many, many causes and many, many conditions and many, many effects, consequences. They all work on each other. Let me just summarize it in the very poetic words of James Joyce in his poem, from his poem called Finnegan's Wake, written in 1967, how he summarizes dependent arising. In the ignorance that implies impression, that needs knowledge, that finds the name form, that whets the wits, that convey context, that sweetens sensation, that drives desire, that adheres to the attachment, that dogs death, that bitches birth, that entails the influence of existentiality. Okay? One single sentence, very poetic. This is found in Finnegan's Wake, 1967, page 18. So now coming back to this undetermined questions. So the only way to get out of this kind of question is to have no views, which is of course not easy. Because some people think that, okay, I got the answer. There's none of this. But then we come to the ninth view, the so-called emptiness view. Then that's another view also. The idea here is not to take the four avyakatas or undetermined disease or question as the standard, simply not to use them at all. This is what the Buddha is trying to tell us. No? And if we can do that, then we don't have to think about anything, we don't have to say anything. Just get on with our meditation, so to speak. That much we have spoken about. All this talk about indeterminate states, undeclared questions, and so on, in a sense does have its benefit because it helps the ancient thinkers to think. They're not so much religious thinkers. For example, the mathematicians, they begin to wonder about all these things, not this, not that. In other words, a kind of emptiness, zero. In fact, the idea of zero, in a sense, is closely related to how the Buddha talks about not answering any of these kind of wrong questions, to maintain silence, zero value, so to speak. So some of these mathematical philosophers started wondering, how do we apply this to mathematics? The idea of something which is no more there. I mean, you can count 1 to 10. What is surprising is for a long time in our history, all those ancient civilizations never had the notion of zero, because they say, what's the point of having a zero? There's nothing there, so that they can count, but there's no idea of zero. Even amongst the Egyptians, Sumerians, they do have some kind of concept of nothing, but they don't have a concept of zero. And they never have a symbol for zero. The foundation of all this thought started in India, from the concept of emptiness. And the very symbol zero came in much later, in the quite late, around the late in the first millennium of our time. And then you have the roots of the idea started in India, then the Arabs developed it into greater detail, then you went to Europe, and then modern mathematics started. So I'm not going to go into details because this is an interesting area by itself. You can read page 87 and 88, there's a bit of summary there. And now what's interesting about zero is you can add it to any number, it doesn't change the number. It's the same number, so to speak. A plus zero is always the same. So what does this tell us? It's like a middle point, because you have zero and then you've got all the positive numbers, and then zero the other way, you've got all the negative numbers. It's right in the center. It's almost like nirvana, if you like. It's big zero, almost. Okay, it's very important. So you have all these zeros, which are annihilationism, and you have all these pluses, which seems to be like eternalism. So we are in the middle, if you realize peace of mind. Well, that is to philosophize on a zero. So this is to show how sometimes this very deep teaching of the Buddha does help other thinkers to develop great ideas on a more mundane level. So how do these ideas we have about the Avyakata or the undeclared questions help us understand modern religion? Well, there are one way it helps is that we can say it's difficult for us to really talk about other religions in terms of our religions. We're still talking about Buddhism anyway. This is not to say the comparison is not good. Definitely we can compare different aspects of religion. But we must remember, what are we comparing? Why are we comparing? For what purpose? If it is for dialogue, if you're comparing, let's say, the higher aspects of practical religion, the theoretical religion is really difficult to compare. You can never really agree very much usefully. But if you really compare the experiential, trans-scriptural experiences outside the dogmas, things become more interesting and useful. For example, if you get all those really wonderful and good people who don't kill and bomb each other in the name of religion, but really practice the religion, they're very kind, compassionate, and they do some kind of introspection, whatever you like to call it, meditation, prayer, and they come to this very calm state of mind. And if they are free to notice these experiences, then you have something interesting to talk about. That much we can say. So in other words, what the Buddha has done is, the Buddha has told us that if anything that is useful for us to compare would be our own experience. We can compare experiences. Comparing theories are not really helpful. In many ways, we can't really compare anything except our experiences, meaning whatever we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, touch, thought. That's all we can compare, really. And we got to understand that's what it is. So in that sense, it's not really easy. But in a way, we can say comparative religion is a way of talking where we can make the other side happy without messing up our own beliefs and faith, if you like. So that may or may not be helpful. Of course, if it maintains religious harmony and promotes spiritual growth, that's great. And I like to say we are heading that way as we understand religion better, and there's greater freedom in the world, and so on. That's the direction we take. Now, coming back to Buddhism, we can say that we can apply this Avyakata teaching, the concept of something being undeclared, undetermined, to some of the Buddhist teachings themselves. Remember I mentioned at the start about the four unthinkables. The four unthinkables is not mentioned in this essay. It just came to me today as I was preparing for this talk. We can apply the concept of undeclared to a number of important Buddhist teachings. Now, for example, when we talk about the Buddha, there's so many things we can't really talk about him. We can only echo what he has told us, and we assume that he himself has stated these things. And of course, from the range of remarks he has made, we have a very good sense to know that what he is likely to have said and what not likely to have said. That's one thing we can know. We can never be exactly sure until we have experienced this truth ourselves. Buddhism is not knowing about the scripture. It's not scripture-based. So fortunately, that's our approach. So in other words, we are safe to experiment, but you must also be wise to stand back and say, okay, this is not right, this is right, and you must know the difference here. You must not get lost. So we can never know the Buddha's mind. And we should not jumpstart his mind, so to speak. We should not talk for him in that sense. Later Buddhist thinkers have done that. They tried to think the Buddha. So they created many new Buddhas, ideas about the Buddha, and so on. So that's Buddhist philosophy. You can never get enlightened through philosophy. Philosophy is the defense of your own thoughts. Philosophy is to look at the silent teachings of the Buddha through words and through thoughts. It's going away from the Buddha. That's why philosophy is going bigger and bigger. Even today you have new philosophical approaches to Buddhism. I'm not saying they're totally unhelpful. It's a great way to begin our first contact with Buddhism, yes, but you've got to go through the great halls of philosophy, journey right through, and come out at the end of it into the pleasant forests of mindfulness. Nirvana is somewhere there. That single tree we often miss because of the forest. But we have to go to move on until we find that tree. So, in a sense, we have to leave the Buddha alone. The Buddha is far away, in a peaceful image. We have to work hard so that we come closer to the image. And we can only come closer to the image through the stillness of our minds. There's no other way. The more you talk, the farther away you go. So right now I'm going further and further away from the Buddha, actually. So the moment you finish listening to this talk, you start your meditation, then you start going back nearer the Buddha. Okay? But like they say, we've got to talk. We've got to talk about what to do, what not to do as a start, yes. In a sense, this is safe talk. Now, then you have, you can talk about meditation, but to be more specific about jhana. Jhana is not about talking, jhana is about meditating, right? So that's quite clear enough, because jhana is about experiencing joy and peace. Joy and peace arise when you let go, you free the senses. You don't have to pay attention to these five senses anymore. You're left only with the mind. In the end, even the mind also is very calm. There's nothing to think about. You're free. Okay, so that's another unthinkable. Something you don't think about, something you enjoy the experience. So that also, in a sense, is avyakata. You cannot determine anything about this in that sense. Then you have karma and rebirth. They also have limits. You can't really talk too much about them. For example, karma, how do we know? We can never know the results, all the results of karma. It's so complicated. We can never know all the rebirths that we have gone through, not the rebirths of others. We don't need to. What we need to know is right now, what's going on, and deal with it. So, There are aspects of the Dharma we must be careful not to get lost in. Now this is why I keep advising people that don't get lost in such teachings as the Abhidharma. Because Abhidharma tried to fix things very nicely. It's like trying to catch a butterfly, chloroform it, put a pin through it, and then set it out nicely, labeled it, give it a proper name, everything very exact. But the poor butterfly is dead. We should let the butterfly fly freely. This is the teaching of the sutta. See the butterfly flying. No need to label it. Just look at it. Enjoy the beauty of this butterfly. It's impermanent. Just look at it. Feel the joy. That's the meaning. Of course, if you are inclined to Abhidharma, obviously you are inclined to philosophy too, then you have to ask yourself, why do I like studying Abhidharma? Why am I inclined to Abhidharma? Maybe we are intellectually inclined. But remember, before you know Abhidharma, the word Abhidharma means about Dharma, but later on the people changed the meaning to higher Dharma. So you give a sense of, wow, I'm studying something higher. It's like nuclear physics. Now, how can we start studying nuclear physics if we know nothing about physics? Or worse, we know nothing about general science. General science is basic Buddhism. Physics is like the suttas. So you've got to begin step by step. Yeah. So if you have a good grounding in the suttas, I think it's a great thing to know Abhidharma too. Remember, Dharma comes first. Even the suttas support the Dharma. And Abhidharma is only useful when the Abhidharma explains and serves us to help us understand the Dharma and suttas better. Where the Abhidharma disagrees with the sutta and the Dharma, we have the right to disregard the teaching. There's an opinion, because all the different schools of Buddhism have their own Abhidharma. Abhidharma is it's unlike the sutta. In the sutta you find lots of convergence. Even the sutta translation in China, you find lots of agreements with the suttas in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, and Southeast Asia as a whole. But the Abhidharma developed later, so different schools of Buddhism, different Abhidharma, different sets of Abhidharma. They have a very sectarian collection, in other words. They were the works and opinions of later Buddhist philosophy, even if you like. So even if you don't study Abhidharma, it's all right. That is Buddhist dogma, whether you like it or not, because your Abhidharma teacher might tell you, that's all, this is the truth. You got to accept it this way. I don't know why, because something like that. So, to note, if we say that Abhidharma talks about ultimate reality, we can say ultimate reality is what you experience through your deep meditation, letting go of all concepts and thoughts. You're on the way to experience ultimate reality. The ultimate reality, of course, is Nirvana itself. So, it's very hard to understand how someone can say, Abhidharma is ultimate reality. It's like saying Abhidharma is Nirvana. It doesn't make sense. So, we have to clear our minds of views, clear our skies of the clouds, so that we can see the mountains, the nature, and the trees far away very clearly. And then we can continue with our journey. So we have a very good idea now, I hope, of the nature of the Avyakata, of the undeclared teachings, why the Buddha is silent on some things, and the Buddha does talk about other things. Avyakata, one meaning is that there are certain questions which are not useful, not related to our spiritual life. They might distract us from our training and practice, from our peace of mind even. The other important aspect we must remember is there are some things which are beyond thoughts. Our minds are not capable of going into the details. There's too many computations, probabilities, and we don't need to. And also there are some things which are beyond thought. You need to calm your thoughts down, to let go your thoughts, because thoughts have to do with the senses, the five senses. You let go of the five senses, you experience reality directly. That's the meaning. It is higher meaning of Achintya. Once you understand that, then you get a bigger picture. In short, we have to unlearn a lot of things in our lives. We have to let go of many views and opinions. You want to study Buddhism, you've got to clear your mind. Every time you look at the suttas, clear your mind. Look at the sutta as an intelligent child, and you surprise yourself. It's just like when you listen to a beautiful piece of music, you don't have an opinion, oh, this guy is going to play like this, and I'm going to know what it is. You don't know. We surprise ourselves with beautiful things. That is why, you go to you go to the Museum of Paintings of Art, you see people sitting there gazing at the great works of the masters. They gaze at the pictures for hours. But there's always something there that surprises them. And they'll come again the next day and look at the pictures again. So the worst thing in religion is to be narrow-minded, whether you're Buddhist or not. Obviously, Buddhists like to say we are open-minded, we're so proud of it, that we become so narrow-minded about the fact that we are open-minded. So that does not help either. It's just words. Open-minded means closed mouth. That means you are ready to listen to others, especially to yourself. What really is troubling me? Where do I need to change? Why do I need to renounce? What's the meaning of true renunciation? Renunciation doesn't mean change of clothes, change of hairstyle. Some people, they are miserable failures socially, economically, psychologically. Then they become monks, and the moment they put on their robe, show their head, people respect them and think, wow, suddenly their ego starts blowing up again, growing again. And they thought that now they are right. There goes the ego game again. And then they mess themselves up. So that's a very dangerous game we play if we have a wrong understanding of renunciation. True renunciation is understanding yourself and letting go of the ego, meaning first letting go of the body in meditation, letting go of the senses, calming the senses, then experiencing the mind, calming the mind, and then experiencing joy and peace. When you experience joy and peace, even if you don't renounce, you're happy. You're as good as a renounced person, or maybe even better than a renounced person who doesn't meditate, who thinks of money, who's worried about having a retreat center, about having a building, having success, about spreading his ideas. Let's not renounce it. So early Buddhism is very simple. Early Buddhism is telling us, keep it simple. The suttas are simple enough. The teachings are all there. And when you look around through the suttas, you see yourself. And when you look deeper through meditation, you see no self. And then finally, when you close your eyes, you have wisdom of self-liberation. You are liberated from the self. So it is the concepts, the ideas, the views that hold us back, that trap us from self-understanding. So we have to free ourselves from all this. Then we become like that butterfly we talked about, freely flying around the Bodhi tree, and we're very happy. Then we have freed ourselves from the cocoon of views. No more to worry even about the undeclared doctrines. So there I end my talk for this time. Let us spend a quiet moment in reflection. We have completed our study of the Avyagata concepts, disease, and questions. It has helped us with some understanding of the nature of the Buddha's teaching, not to worry about wrong questions, things which do not concern the spiritual life. It helps us to focus the way we work to discover ourselves, to know better how we think, how we feel, and how we become free of suffering. Reflecting in this way is very good mental karma, but apart of such karma, may we attain mental peace and success of every good kind in this life itself. Above all, may we attain spiritual awakening, especially stream winning, in this life itself. In this moment of peace, let us send out our loving kindness to all those who have taught us in one way or another. May they all be well and happy. May the Dharma touch their hearts fully and liberate them. And all those who are near and dear to us, may they too be well and happy in the Dharma way. And to those not touched with the Dharma, may they come closer to the Dharma and be liberated too. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.